Living in Virginia, you're in the fast lane on the information superhighway. We've invested $3 billion in Virginia's broadband network to give you one of the fastest internet connection speeds in the world, so you can build relationships, bring new business to our state, and meet the future of education. It's amazing what we can do together. Visit VCTA.com to learn how broadband connects the Commonwealth.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the VCTA Broadband Association, connecting Virginians to their government. Welcome, Delegate Subramanyam. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you so much for having me on here. I'm very excited to be here.
You are a freshman member of the House of Delegates. How have things transpired so far for you?
They're going great. I mean, there's a lot of learning experiences, obviously. Getting to know Richmond is very different from other types of legislatures. I worked on Capitol Hill. I worked in the White House, but Richmond is very special, unique. It's the oldest democracy, and tradition is very important. So as a freshman, I think a lot of my work has been around trying to learn kind of how things work here and work within the system.
And you've made some inroads already with the Commonwealth Caucus. Talk to us about what inspired that idea. Who are some of your members and co-founders?
Yeah, when I was campaigning, I felt like there was a lot of divisive rhetoric out there. I mean, you start with what's going on in the White House and what's going on around our federal politics, and I think that's trickled down to the state level too. So I felt like, if I'm going to be a public servant, I want to make sure that everyone, regardless of party, feels like I'm representing them and like I'm looking out for their interests. And so that's where it started. I started hearing the same thing from others who are running, and I decided, if we get elected, let's get together and let's form a coalition of members who have the same idea of wanting to work across the aisle, wanting to get things done and put governing before partisanship. And so that's where the idea came from. I'm working with several people who have been in the General Assembly for a long time, as well as several new members as well. And it's a diverse group from different backgrounds, from different parties, obviously, different chambers. Half are in the Senate, half are in the House. And so it's really great to see a diverse group of people come together, have the same idea of wanting to work across the aisle and govern first and put partisanship and the rhetoric aside. And I think it's led to a lot of great results. And so I'm very happy about how things are going so far.
So as I understand it, I believe Senator Hanger on the Senate side was a co-founder, and then was it Delegate Mugler over in the House of Delegates?
Yeah, it was myself and Senator Hanger. Okay. So we're the co-chairs right now. We see ourselves as we're just helping it get off the ground, and hopefully we can pass on the chair roles to others in the next session or in the future. But all of us are working together, and all of us are pretty involved. And you already kind of see it. We look out for each other on the floor and committees. It's really nice to go into a committee room knowing that I've been able to talk to a Republican about legislation, and they were able to break with their party because they see that it's good for their constituents and didn't just toe the party line. And so it's really nice to have that.
So as I understand it, about a month ago, there were about 15 people who were members. Have you had a meeting of the group yet? We did.
We had a great meeting. We put together some kind of guidelines for how we want to conduct ourselves, what we want to do. One of the things that we agreed on pretty early on was, we're going to try to do social things as well, so that we build that camaraderie.
Yes.
And we're also going to try to talk business as well. And I know that. this is a town that's very relationship heavy, relationship focused, and sometimes if you say the wrong thing to especially the majority party, whether it's Democrats or Republicans, you'll get chastised and things like that will happen. And we're trying to see if we can get past that, or at least try to address some of those issues when it comes to going against the bill because of who is representing it or which party is representing it. We want to get past that. And I think that's, you've seen in this Democratic majority, a lot of Republican bills are actually moving forward. A lot of Republican bills that are, especially ones that are great for their constituents, great for their localities. And then a lot of Republicans, this is one push that I wanted to make, was a lot of Republicans, we're assigning them to committees based on their expertise. That was something that was not happening before. So, if you have an expertise in medicine, you're on the health committee now. That didn't always happen before.
So I take it you're trying to create a safe space for people, even at polar opposites, who can sit down and talk through complex issues? Yeah,
I think that's definitely one goal of it is kind of having off the records, and that's what the social events are going to be about, having off the record conversations where we can kind of get through the noise and try to figure out what people really need and what's the real problem. I think sometimes, especially if you are in one party, it's hard for you to actually have a frank conversation with someone in another party. You're afraid that that'll be used against you in your re-election, or afraid it'll be used against you in public later on. And so what we want to do is foster some types of relationships where we can be messengers to each other and know that there's not going to be any sort of consequences down the line that we're afraid of.
You have some pretty interesting committee assignments, cities, counties, and towns, education, and I believe communications, technology, and innovation. Talk to us about those assignments and how they help you represent your constituents back home.
Yeah, I'm a tech enthusiast, a tech nerd. I'm an attorney, but most of my clients work in the tech space or around the tech space, and so it's been great to be part of the Communications and Technology and Innovation Committee. I was a tech advisor in the Obama White House, and one of the things that we saw was even if the White House, even if the President of the United States wanted to do something, that it didn't happen unless the states had buy-in. And so it's great to be here in Richmond, being able to work for the people of Virginia on making sure our government is being innovative and that we're getting the most out of people's tax dollars by using innovative technologies. We're making sure everyone has broadband access and they can use technology as a tool to develop their own skills or put it in our schools. And so the Technology Committee in particular has been very exciting. It used to be a punishment actually around here. I'm sure you know. A lot of people didn't want the Technology Committee because they never got any bills. But one of my campaign promises and one of the things I asked the Speaker to do was make that committee a substantive committee, and that's what we've done. And I'm very excited. We had more bills in this committee this session than we had in prior committees combined, and so prior sessions combined. And so I'm very excited about the work we're doing there. And education is a top priority for me. Loudoun County, where I represent, Prince William County, we have great schools, but people move there because of the schools, and the deficiencies are picked up very quickly. I hear about any deficiencies in Virginia schools quickly, and so I want to make sure that we're funding our schools, we're paying our teachers what they're worth. There's a lot we can do for our kids, and being on the Education Committee is a great honor.
What about counties, cities, and towns? I take it that's not boring either.
Oh, not at all, not at all. I mean, we had some pretty heated discussions this session, especially the war memorials. We gave, the House voted a couple of days ago to give localities the power to decide whether they want to keep a certain statue or not. And that was a very hard decision. You've got to really understand the issues, and you have to understand other people's counties too, not just your own. That's what I love about it. This is a great way to learn Virginia. So if someone in Richmond wants something, or someone in Southwest Virginia needs something, I want to make sure that what they're doing has the buy-in of their locality, and it's a great way to learn the state because of that.
Talk to us a little bit about blockchain technology and also how that relates to artificial intelligence, for example,
Yeah.
facial recognition, those kinds of issues.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, I'm a technology enthusiast, and I think there's a lot of promise in emerging technologies, both in terms of the private sector. We have one of the biggest blockchain companies in the country in Virginia. We have we have a couple different companies actually. In Northern Virginia, we have all the tech companies.
Right.
So and obviously Amazon's coming, but in my district alone, 70% of the internet comes through our data centers there. We've got Google, we've got Facebook, we've got everyone in the 87th district. But these emerging technologies can also be used in the public sector too. Blockchain is a great way. Supply chain is a big issue. My wife works in the industry. It's hard to keep track of how we're spending the money, where the money's going, how are we, when we're buying things, tracking them, and even just real estate transactions. There's a lot of different ways that we can use emerging technologies to make our government services better and more efficient, and so we can be more responsive to the average person. One of the things I found, it was especially in my time in federal government, was if people have a bad experience with their government, so take the DMV for example, if people have a bad experience, they don't trust government to do anything. Mm-hmm. And so they'll say, let's privatize everything because the government doesn't work. And so we want to make sure that people trust their government and people have a good experience with their government at every step of the way. And so I think that's why I'm enthusiastic about emerging technologies. Yes, in the private sector, we want to foster it. We want to address the challenges. But in the public sector, we can also modernize our government.
Talk to us a little about health care. I think you have some legislation dealing with cost of drugs.
Yeah. I knocked on 14,000 doors in my primary and general election, and one of the things I saw from all those conversations was there's a big problem when it comes to the cost of prescription drugs, and whether it's insulin, something that's been around for a long time, where the price was one price, but then it spiked because of lack of competition in some cases, and then there's really life-saving drugs that are just very expensive and hard for people to afford, but they need them if they want to survive. And so we've got a lot of challenges in that sector, but I think we can solve them, and we can solve them here in Richmond. Right now in the federal government, there's a lot of gridlock, and because of that, there are a lot of challenges all over the country, and I think it's going to be up to the states, and it's going to be up to the General Assembly here for Virginians to be able to solve some of these issues, and prescription drugs is a great example of that.
Another one that affects consumers is this phenomena of surprise billing.
Yes.
And of course, that's something that's working its way through the General Assembly this year.
Absolutely. I'm a co-patron of a bill with Delegate Torian that tries to address the issue of surprise billing. We don't know, as a lawyer, everyone knows what price I'm going to be billing them. They're going to know the hourly price up front. It's harder to do that in the healthcare system. It's harder for providers to tell people what the price is going to be. But people don't know if they're going out of network sometimes. They don't know, and a lot of times people in network, when they go to a provider in network, the provider will refer them out of network without even knowing it. And so we want to make sure that providers have the tools they need to let people know when they're going out of network, and let people know when they're going to get a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 bill for something they thought was already covered. And so, and those bills are not frivolous. I mean, it's making people decide make hard decisions about, are we putting food on the table? Are we paying our healthcare bills? Are we going to go in debt for this healthcare costs? This is a huge issue, and I'm so glad that we had a very productive week, and I'm so glad that we were able to pass this. People talk a lot about guns and abortion, but we are doing so many great things here this session in Richmond.
Yeah, I guess that kind of circumstance really rears its ugly head in the emergency room. Mm-hmm. You have something, a car accident or whatever, you go to the emergency room, you find out 2 months later that the anesthesiologist that was used was out of network, and you get this huge bill. So we want to protect the consumer, but who winds up paying?
everyone pays. The patient pays, and even if the patient is able to only pay for some of the costs, other people who are in the patient's group that is insured, they have to pay. Their premiums go up. Everyone pays. I'm a volunteer firefighter and EMT in Loudoun County, and one of the things I was seeing when I was campaigning was when I go on my shifts, people wouldn't want to go to the hospital. We would go to a call, and people were so scared they were more scared about the hospital than they were about their pain and about dying. That's where we are in our healthcare system right now. And so again, I just want to make sure that people feel like they can get the care they need without going bankrupt.
And you have some other legislation dealing with firefighters, do you not?
Yeah, we're trying to. So a lot of people don't understand that when they call 911, the person that's on the other line, they go through a lot as well. As firefighters and EMTs and police officers as well, we get a lot of the credit for things, but the 911 dispatchers, they're the ones that take the call, that get all the information needed, and they make or break a call, really. If they keep the person who called on the line and get all the information we need, that makes their job so much safer, so much easier. And so, but unfortunately, they don't get the same benefits as firefighters or EMTs. And I really think they should. It's very traumatic. We get the closure of putting out the fire or responding to the call. They have to go straight to the next call without knowing what happened to the person that they just developed a relationship with and just talked to and got the information from. So that was a priority for me, and I think we're going to keep pushing on that to make sure we also attract and retain great 911 operators.
A lingering issue in your district relates to tolls. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you heard a lot about that during your campaign, and you continue to hear about that.
Yeah. We've got the Greenway, which is a very expensive toll road. They are regulated by the State Corporation Commission, but unfortunately, the SEC does not have the tools they need to be able to regulate them effectively. And we're trying to, I introduced pretty bold legislation. I carried it over to next year so that we could have a year to negotiate with the Greenway on newer tolls that I think will be more beneficial to commuters. But I'm someone who doesn't believe in toll roads at all, unless they're hot lanes. Mm-hmm. I believe that I vote against every toll bill, and I will continue to, unless it's a hot lane of a road that already exists and that's crowded. So I'm okay with if you want to spend an extra $5 on a hot lane, great. But I think roads and infrastructure should always be the purview of the public sector. We should be building our own roads. I think a lot of the toll roads in Virginia and really a lot of the infrastructure problems is the result of the federal government, again, not acting and being in gridlock. We hear a lot from the White House or from Congress about a big $1 trillion infrastructure bill, but we haven't seen it. So in the meantime, the state taxes have to go to building roads and building traffic lights, and so that's where we are right now. But I completely oppose toll roads, and I'm going to continue to.
Now, how's Metro doing, especially out to Dulles?
Metro's, I'm really happy that, we've got the Silver Line coming out. It's going to be a real boon for our community and for Loudoun County. Right now the construction is a little bit behind, but we knew that there were always going to be some delays. What I want to make sure of is that, yes, let's figure out Metro, but in the end, a lot of people aren't going to take the Metro, especially 2 or 3 stops in Loudoun County. The reality is people are still going to drive around. You have to drive to the Metro itself. Very few people live walking distance from the Metro. It's not like Arlington. And so we need to understand that reality, and we need to make sure that we continue to invest in our roads. One of the great things we did this session was we restored funding for roads, especially Route 50, which goes through my district. We restored that funding for Northern Virginia roads that was taken away when we paid for Metro. It should never have been a zero-sum game, but somehow it was. But now we've got the funding we need to pay for roads and pay for Metro, which I think will be beneficial in the long run.
And of course, I believe the governor's budget includes another tax to help maintain and fund new construction on our roads.
Yes, absolutely. We rely a lot on the gas tax, but this is probably good news, bad news, but people are using less gasoline now because they have electric vehicles or they have much more energy efficient vehicles. And so because of that, though, the gas tax it cannot be relied upon anymore. And so we needed to find other sources of revenue. It's necessary. I think a lot of people I've talked to are willing to pay an extra, whatever it is, couple cents to per gallon to make sure that we have a great road system.
Now, is there a way to transition to a different system, for example, one based on mileage with GPS?
There could. I have some reservations, privacy concerns, for instance, about that. But yeah, it's definitely possible. I think it's more usage-based, and usage-based generally is thought of as more fair. But there might be a lot of problems with implementing something like that.
Now, another real significant move this session has been in the area of voting rights. Lots of bills. Talk to us about some of those bills.
Yeah, absolutely. I co-patroned a bill that seems a little silly at first. It was to move the deadline for voting on election day from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. But I represent a district that has a lot of commuters, and that 1 hour is a huge difference. I remember on election day, I stood outside of polls and I saw so many people rush in at 6:59, but they tried to get home as fast as they could, but they couldn't. And so that was a bill that I co-patroned that I'm very proud of. Another one that I co-patroned was same-day registering. A lot of people, I have the largest district in terms of population in the state, and a lot of them are new citizens who are just getting their citizenship, and they are just getting to register to vote, but they couldn't, unfortunately, hit the deadline. They didn't really know the deadline. It's kind of hard to find sometimes. And so being able to register right up until election day, I thought was very important. But the most important one was obviously no excuse early voting. I think that a lot of people were turned off by the idea of early voting and turned off by the process and having to have an excuse. Even if they had a legitimate excuse, they just felt like they couldn't early vote. But now they can, and without any excuses. So I'm proud of those reforms.
What about making Election Day a holiday?
I love that. I love that as well. I think it's already a school holiday in Loudoun County, but making it a holiday for everyone, I think, is going to be a great way to boost turnout. In the end, I think whether you're Democrat or Republican, I want everyone to vote. I want everyone to have their voice heard, and this is the best way to do it, is making voting as easy as possible.
And what about doing away with the photo ID requirement?
Oh, again, a great reform. I've heard from a lot of constituents, not everyone has a driver's license, especially older citizens or college students who don't need it. We take that for granted, but once you're 80, 85, sometimes you don't need a driver's license anymore. You don't drive around as much anymore. So you throw away your license, and now where are you? All you have is your passport. A lot of people don't have passports. They don't travel as much. And so I was hearing that a lot from constituents. Why do we need to have a photo ID? We don't need to anymore. You can sign an affidavit. You can present other forms of IDs. Students, college students can present their college ID as well. And so there's a lot of ways that voting fraud was really not an issue. But what is an issue is getting people to vote and people having the tools to vote.
Education, another big issue, and of course you're on that committee. The First Lady's initiatives in terms of early childhood education.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'm about to have my first kid in about a month, and so I want her to be able to go to great schools, and preschool to third grade is a very critical time, especially, and we see a lot of the problems later on in schooling, middle school and high school, come from a deficiency during that time, and so not everyone can afford preschool. The preschool is incredibly difficult. Childcare is incredibly difficult. So we want to make sure that as many people as possible have the tools that they need to educate their children from a very early stage. That's where you can really make a big difference, get the foundation necessary for a great education and great outcome.
How are we doing in terms of the ratio of student counselors to students in our schools?
Yeah, right now we're not doing great, but again, we passed great legislation to make sure that ratio is about 250 to 1. It seems like a lot, but right now it's a lot worse. I've seen schools that don't have counselors at all. I've seen schools that have counselors who are meant to do several jobs and not just counseling, and they feel overwhelmed and underpaid for that. And so I think by having that ratio, we're going to be able to give kids people to turn to when they need it, and I'm excited about that.
So how are your schools doing in your district?
Loudoun County has great schools. I'm very proud of the teachers that we have. They're underpaid, overworked, but they they really give our kids a great education. The county has done a great job investing in our school infrastructure. It's always going to be a priority. People move to Loudoun County from other counties for the schools. And so I'm proud of what we've done in Loudoun County, but I also want to make sure that we continue to attract great teachers in Loudoun County and Prince William County too. And we continue to give kids a great education, and STEM and humanities and arts. We should give them everything they need. And then in high school, people have a choice. If they want to go to a magnet school, they can. If they want to go to a vocational school, they can. I think that's important as well, especially later in the education system. So I love our schools in Loudoun. I want to make sure they continue to be great, and I want to make sure that people continue to feel like their kids are getting a great education.
Looks like we're going to have to do something to assist the lottery, because their funds have been significantly diminished by these gray machines. What's going to happen there?
I know there's the issues again being addressed, where we voted on several gambling bills over the past week, and it's a good question. I think that we're going to have to find new ways to pay for schools eventually. I don't know if the current system is sustainable, but just like the gas tax and our roads, if it comes to a point where we need to find new revenue to pay for our education system, then we're going to have to do it. But right now we're trying to address the issue.
And I guess the governor's trying to address continuing health care issue by increasing the tax on cigarettes.
Yes, that's right. And again, though, the things that have gotten the attention: abortion, guns, and a few new taxes. So yes, the cigarette tax is going to go up. But one thing that people don't understand is it's going to pay for something incredibly important. That is a reinsurance program. A lot of times your insurance premiums go up because of a group of people that are, have terminal illnesses or long-term illnesses that are costing a lot of money. And so if you're in an insurance system or group that where those people are in it, your premiums go up to pay for their care. But if the state has a reinsurance program, basically a backstop for the most sick people who need the most resources, then that really lowers everyone's costs. And so yes, the cigarette tax is going to go up. There's going to be a few taxes, but the cost is people are going to get those costs back in terms of lower premiums for their health care, for the gas tax, for better roads, and the ability to get to work faster and spend more time with your family instead of on the road. So don't feel bad about the taxes, because they're going to a really good cause, and we've worked a lot on modeling to make sure that these are good investments.
And so the environment affects us all. I know there's been a lot of discussion, and there have been some bills dealing with environmental protections. I don't think the Green New Deal, however, that Delegate Rasool was sponsoring has passed the House. What's going on in that arena?
Yeah, so we had the Virginia Clean Energy Act, the VCEA. Delegate Sullivan introduced that, and that was able to get through. The Green New Deal, unfortunately, the costs associated with it were a little bit too much for the Appropriations Committee. But I think I voted for the VCEA. It's an imperfect bill, but it's a historic bill, and historic in terms of investments in wind and solar, historic in terms of making sure that we make leaps forward in getting to 100% carbon neutral and zero carbon in Virginia. That's going to be really big. I want to make sure Virginia is the clean energy capital of America and of the world, and we can do that. We have the resources to do that. One thing that I would like to see is that we're protecting ratepayers more. I don't want the average person's energy bill to go up $30, $40 a month just to pay for technologies that will not be able to help our energy bills for another 5 or 10 years. I think we have to think about the short term too, and not just the long term. We have to make sure that the transition is smooth so that workers feel like they can, people who work in the fossil fuel industry can make that transition to the green economy. And so those are two concerns I still have. The bill that passed in the House is going to have to be reconciled with the bill that passed in the Senate. And I hope that through that process we can get some other legislation that addresses those issues. I have a legislation that protects ratepayers. Delegate Jay Jones has some as well. I hope that can be integrated into the final bill. But it's going to be historic whatever we do.
Great. Well, we're glad you're here, and keep up the good work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the VCTA Broadband Association. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans.
you.